Nicole touched down in Florida as a hurricane Thursday, and the storm sent homes along the coast toppling into the Atlantic Ocean and damaged many others, including hotels and a row of high-rise condos. At least 2 people were killed.
President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan has been blocked by a federal judge in Texas. The White House says the Justice Department is appealing that. The AP's Tim McGuire.
Federal District Judge Mark Pittman, a Trump appointee in Fort Worth, Texas, says the White House student loan forgiveness program is an unconstitutional effort to bypass Congress. Pittman writing, "In this country, we are not ruled by an all-powerful executive with a pen and a phone." The White House has argued the 2003 Higher Education Relief Opportunity for Students Act allows the Secretary of Education to waive or modify any statutory or regulatory provision applicable to the student financial assistance programs as part of a national emergency. I'm Tim McGuire.
This morning, there's word that the administration is ramping up efforts to reduce methane emissions, targeting the oil and gas industry. This is AP News. Republicans are getting more vocal in their public criticism of former President Trump, with some saying it's time for the party to move on.
Former President Donald Trump is moving forward with his planned November 15th announcement about a potential third presidential run. His decision comes as Republicans continue to blame Trump for an unexpectedly poor midterm showing. Some, such as Virginia's Republican lieutenant governor, are calling for the party to move on from Trump. Some advisors had urged Trump to delay his planned announcement until after the December 6th Senate runoff election in Georgia to avoid turning that race into a referendum on Trump and unintentionally helping Democrats. The Georgia race could determine which party controls the U.S. Senate. Trump is now seen as more vulnerable after candidates he supported in the midterm elections did not pan out as expected. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
And I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
This is 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now, your WCPT 820 weather update.
Here's the latest Chicago weather update. Skies will become mostly sunny here for today, with temperatures steady early, then slowly falling throughout.
Okay, now let's. I'm up.
Per hour,
Jewel. Hi, how you doing, Pastor? How are you?
Good. Well, how are you?
I am doing well, thank you. Thank you so much for your note.
Sunday mostly sunny and a high of 99.
So kind.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, and meteorologist Jennifer H.
Can you hear her?
It's 50.
I need you to keep speaking, Pastor.
Sure.
So she can.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18.
Okay, can you hear her now?
19, 20.
I got her. We're good.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Understand.
I got you.
Happy families and better outcomes.
Great, thanks.
At nrchealth.com. If you're struggling with paying your credit card or making your mortgage payment and are overwhelmed, you need to call Team Hochberg, your trusted local lender. According to CNBC, 43% of consumers expect to add to their debt during the second half of this year. 23% have no emergency fund savings, 28% have an emergency fund to cover only 3 months of expenses, and only 22% have an emergency fund to cover up to 5 months of expenses. Listeners repeatedly tell me how stressful their credit card debt is on them and their families. If you have any questions about reducing your debt or paying your mortgage, please call Team Hochberg for a free consultation. We'll help you if we can and give you an honest assessment of your current situation. Team Hochberg has helped thousands of radio listeners, but we can't help if you don't call 855-56-DAVID or visit 56david.com. 855-563-2843 or visit 56david.com. Lower.com, equal housing lender, NMLS 1124060.
Hi, I'm Brad Kozlowski, driver number 2, Discount Tire Ford Mustang. Did you know one of the most important keys to success on the track and for safe driving on the road is having the right pressure in your tires? Properly inflated tires are essential to help you get the best gas mileage and keep you driving safely. Check your tire pressure at least once a month or stop by your local tire retailer for your check.
A message from the U.S. Tire Manufacturers Association.
Because facts matter. You are listening to WCPT Page 20.
The best people to fight for our community.
We have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much.
So with his life, just doing his job as a Detroit bus driver.
This coronavirus is for real, and we out here as public workers doing our job, trying to make an honest living to take care of our families. This is real, and y'all need to take this serious.
Coronavirus took Jason's life 11 days after he recorded that message. Blacks are twice as likely to die from the virus. Until this fight is over, the least we can do is to do our part and stay home for those who can't. Together, we can help beat this thing. If you must go out, be sure to social distance and wear masks and gloves in public places. For the sake of our families, our friends, for fallen heroes like Jason.
I'm out of here, y'all. I love y'all. Peace.
This message was brought to you by Black is Human. Learn more at blackishuman.com.
A gentle breeze blows across your face as you take a refreshing sip of water, appreciating the stillness of another morning fishing on the lake. The distant gurgle of a stream reminds you of days spent playing in the creek, the cool, clear water rushing between your toes. You love this time with nature, the feeling of putting everything on hold to connect with the world around you.
Okay.
30 seconds or so.
Thank you.
No fish, no lake, no water. One of life's most vital resources, irreplaceably depleted. Time is running out to protect fresh water, and without our love, it can and will disappear. It's our choice. Love it or lose it.
Stand by.
Thank you.
Visit
Have a great show.
at wwf.org/love.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am green.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Happy Friday, November 12th, 2022. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. Getting a little bit of an echo. We're going to get that together for you. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to meet my morning stars over on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And please meet me over on my Twitter feed at Santita J. That is the one that I have at Santita J. And my Facebook page is actually Santita Jackson and Friends, not Santita Jackson. That's just a landing page. Everybody's requesting to be my friend there, and I want to be your friend. I just can't add any more people there. They have a limit, and they're flushing people out. And so I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say to everybody. I've been trying to do this for years to get everybody to understand Santita Jackson and Friends is where you have to go in order for us to communicate on Facebook. Let's talk about young people and this and the midterms. Many people, more and more people are saying that they saved the midterms, and many of them are very, very progressive, and they're doing a whole lot. They're doing a whole lot. They are winning. People who would not have won 30, 40 years ago, they're winning today. Maxwell Frost, Summer Lee, the squad not only kept their numbers, they increased their numbers. What does this mean to our politics? And then, everybody, let's talk about let's talk about that. What about this red wave, this red ripple? I want to know how the pundits got it so wrong. Or did they? Or are our politics more nuanced? Are they less about party and more about the person who represents you? Call me. Text me at 773-763-9278. 773-763-WCPT. I want to know what your thoughts are. Why you think the Republicans did not do better And why did the Democrats do so well? Of course, we're still waiting to find out what's going to happen December 6th in the runoff in Georgia, but we're going to see what's going to happen in Arizona. We're going to see what's going to happen in Nevada. If those seats stay Democrat, it will then, you're not going to be as dependent upon Georgia. But of course, we want Raphael Warnock to win. Certainly I do, Senator Warnock. But the fact is, it's going to be a fight to the finish in Georgia. So let's talk about that too. I want to hear your thoughts about the week that was, the week that is, because indeed, we are now in the throes of 2024. Do not be fooled. It seems that former President Donald Trump, at least he's hinting at, announcing that he's going to run next week, which has thrown the party into disarray. Boy, oh boy. And then President Biden yesterday said, yeah, I'd always planned to run again. What do you think about that? Call me at 773-763-9278. I just want you to it's a free Friday. So I want to hear, of course, you have to be nice and kind, but I want to hear what you have to say, what your reflections on the week are. If you could be on any of these morning shows as a pundit, what would you be saying? Call me at 773-763-9278, because they wouldn't have jobs, everybody, were it not for you. Think about that. They're talking about you, and many of them are saying what they think you think, even though they're not near you at all. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 50 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 32 degrees, cloudy. As John Coleman used to say here on Channel 7, I think it's about to get cold, everybody. In the NFL, the Panthers 25, the Falcons 15. In the NBA, the Timberwolves will be facing off against the Grizzlies. The Bulls have the night off. In the NHL, the Kings were triumphant over Chicago 2-1, and the Wild will be playing the Kraken tonight, everybody. This is Veterans Day, a federal holiday in which we honor the men and women who have served in the armed forces. God bless you to all of them, including my grandfathers. Our regional observances and events are set to take place all across the country to pay a tribute to millions of these military heroes. Entry to all U.S. national parks is also free today, including the most popular ones, which often draw record crowds. And here are a few other headlines. Votes are still being counted in critical House and Senate races that will decide who controls Congress next year. In the race for the Senate, election officials say it may take hours or days to count the more than 500,000 votes remaining in Arizona and about 95,000 more votes that they have not yet counted in Nevada. Republicans need to pick off 2 more Democratic seats to win the Senate majority. Meanwhile, there are many key races that have yet to be called that will determine the future of the House in January. Republicans appear to be slowly inching toward that magic number of 218, but we will have to see. Indeed, the path to victory for the Democrats is narrowing, but now there's doubt about whether Congressman McCarthy will become the Speaker of the House. Now people are tossing about the name of Stephen Scalise, someone who's well liked in the House, the gentleman who was shot a few years ago. We'll have to see what happens, everybody. A federal judge has struck down President Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness program, declaring it illegal. Biden's program was already on hold due to this CNN report, due to a separate legal challenge. But a new lawsuit filed by a conservative group will delay student loan relief even further. On Thursday, a Texas federal judge who was nominated by then President Trump found that the executive branch does not have clear congressional authorization to create the student loan forgiveness program. The Biden administration is appealing the decision. What do you think about that, everybody? What do you think about that? Banks control everything. That's what's up. At least 4 people have been killed after Nicole hit Florida's eastern coast as a Category 1 hurricane this week. Photos of the damage show buildings and homes that have been ripped apart in the wake of dangerous storm surges and powerful winds. Indeed, Daytona is completely underwater. Completely. Americans grappling with high inflation are getting some relief at the grocery store. Thank heavens. Prices overall have surged 12.4% through October versus a year ago, but analysts at the market research firm Nielsen IQ say there are some deals to be had in fresh produce. The average price for prepared mixed vegetables dropped 68% 68% versus the same price as last year. But still, 1 in 4 Americans are not going to have Thanksgiving because they cannot afford it. Think about that, everybody. Think about it. 1 in 4 Americans cannot afford a Thanksgiving dinner for their families. President Biden is heading to a UN summit today where he is expected to tout his climate record. In a speech to the COP27 summit in Egypt, President Biden will proclaim the U.S. is back as a global leader on climate change following passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, and he will be in smaller countries. So, those are some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. Wanted you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Pardon my mistake. It is November 11th, everybody. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, the author of the book, I See You, Sis. I See You, Sis. You'll see these women in the Bible. They're just like you. God uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things. It's a joy to be with you today. Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, pastor of the First Baptist Church in Bridgehampton, New York, the Holy Ghost Church out there. I love it. I love it. I love it. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great this morning. How are you?
You know,
it is always a pleasure to be with you guys.
Always a joy to be with you today. Always a joy. And you know, you give us such inspiration with your good news. And there is good news to be had out here. Even in these tumultuous times, you remind us of that every week. Maybe if we just start looking at some of the small things, we can be grateful for the even bigger things, right?
Right, exactly.
Well, what is the good news today?
Well, the good news today is our world is upside down sometimes, right? Sometimes we feel as though we're aliens, we're resident aliens on this planet. What I'm trying to say is that oftentimes we feel out of place. When I consider the book of Ruth, I'm always looking at that book as a book of placement. If you were to consider it, I know people look at it as a love story and story about family and survival, and it is all of those things. But more than that, I have found it to be a book of placement where everyone from Ruth to Naomi is looking for their place or finding their purpose in a place. But even before you get to the biblical personalities, you have to consider that the book itself is out of place. This book of hope, this book of survival, this book of dedication to God, even from the most unlikely person, is wedged in between the books of Judges and Samuel, where there's so much debauchery going on, so much confusion going on. As the word said, everyone was doing what they thought was best to do. They were without a king, and God raises up these judges. And so in a time almost like our world, where everything is topsy-turvy and everything is negative and it seems like there's no hope, wedged in between that is a book full of hope. How did that book get there? There are some versions of sacred texts that put it first. There are some versions of sacred texts that say it's supposed to be read during festival time. There are some versions of it that say it's only supposed to be used for these purposes. But in our Christian Bible, we have it wedged in between debauchery. And so you have to look at it and say, how did it get here? Maybe that's you today. Maybe that's what you're thinking about your life. Somehow you're wedged in an area, a space, where you're wondering, how did I get here? I'm completely out of place. That's what I want to talk to you about today. Have you ever felt out of place? Have you ever felt uncomfortable? Have you ever felt like you're feeling out of place in life? Well, I want to give you some thoughts about how to get back on track. Here's the truth. Humans are social beings. No one wants to feel excluded from things or activities or people, but it's possible at times to feel out of place. The first thing you have to do is understand, and I understand that feeling out of place is scary, but I want you to know today it's not permanent. Just because you're not in a place where you feel comfortable doesn't mean that it's permanent. The first thing you have to do is acknowledge and accept your feelings. Some people have good, stable jobs, nice salary, work environment, but even in that environment, maybe you feel lost and unhappy with your work. So the only solution in a situation like that is to explore options that make you feel fulfilled. So acknowledge and accept your feelings. It's okay to say, I'm uncomfortable in this space, and it's okay to not want to stay. The fact that you feel out of place, confused, or lost is the first step toward getting back on track, but it requires you to be honest about where you are. The next thing is prayer and meditation. think deeply and ask thoughtful questions about this feeling and how you can move forward. Think about when you started to notice the changes and pray about that. Meditate about that. I started to notice the change here. I feel excited when I do this. I enjoy this. I want to feel better. I want to feel fulfilled. Here's what I think I deserve. Pray about it. Journal about it. Meditate about it. Write things down that can reduce the stress and help you manage the anxiety about feeling out of place. Maintain a good support system. You know how it takes a village to raise a child? It takes a village to raise you too. Count on your village. Talk to your friends and family, the people who you do feel safe with in a time in your life when you don't feel safe. And then be grateful. I have found gratitude to be the secret weapon in most things that ail us. Gratitude changes your brain. It changes your perspective, changes the way you look at things. Some of the reasons you should be grateful include a meal, a sunny day, waking up, at least some measure of health. Indeed, you didn't do maybe anything incredible, but you can always be thankful. You can show your appreciation for small things, even when you feel out of place. And lastly, consider where you want to be. Maybe you're not where you want to be, but think about where you'd like to be. Maybe you're not where you ought to be, but consider a future where you are where you need to be. You're not out of place and you're feeling fulfilled. So shifting your focus, nurturing your desire to look forward can really help you when you feel out of place. Barbara Streisand said it this way: somewhere there's a place for us. Even if you're feeling out of place, always know this: you have a place in God's heart and you have a place in God's mind. There's a place for you, even when you feel out of place. That's the good news.
Amen to that. Amen to that. We all belong somewhere. And right now, you belong right here, everybody. Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, absolutely. For anyone who might be having some thoughts that are taking you down a dark path, there is a reason that you're here. There's a reason that you're here. There's a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason. And if you hang around long enough, it will be your season too. Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, you got to get the book. I See You, Sis. You're going to see yourself in these sisters in the Bible, and you need to see yourself. Because everybody's been through the same thing. We just keep doing it, in different times and spaces. But nothing you're going through is too hard for God to solve. Nothing you're going through is something that nobody else has been through, Pastor. You tell old folks your problems and they just go, they don't even move. They don't flinch. They're like, okay, well, let me tell you how I dealt with it. Or you're like, what? Yes. Everybody, I See You, Sis. Go to Amazon and get that book. Support this ministry, but I promise you it's going to end up supporting and blessing you. Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, sending you so much love today. Thank you for that good news. Hadn't thought of it that way, wedged up in between all of that debauchery. Love it.
That's right.
Oh, boy. Absolutely. Dr. Shanita Knighton, infection preventionist, registered nurse, and college lecturer. She does so much. She's the executive director of the Association for Professionals in Infection Control and Epidemiology organization. They do so much all around the world to make us aware of how we can prevent infection. Indeed, infection or illness is not your destiny. Wellness is. And we welcome you to the show once again. We are once again in, I was about to say the Christmas season, but it's the holiday season where, you know what? People are going to be out here seeing each other, greeting each other, being with each other. People have gone on about their business while we're still in a pandemic. And there's that. So as we go into this holiday season, what do you want us to know, Dr. Knighton?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think it's important, and it's so crazy, Santita, because sometimes I feel like I sound like a broken record with sharing information, because I remind people of how much we need to get back to the basics. Prime example, I was telling somebody the other day, so I gave a talk in Baltimore, and the talk essentially was just reminding us that sometimes we overcomplicate things in a manner for which it tends to do more harm than it does good. And so we think that something is so hard that we actually tend to not do it, opposed to being able to do it. And I'm bringing that up because I was telling them about my time in nursing school. And this actually might remind you of your grandmother, Gertrude. But when we were in school, I told them that when we had to bathe patients, infection prevention and control was in our veins. When we had to fix beds, it was in our, it was just embedded in us. And it started out with hand washing. So hand washing is one thing, but the one thing that people tend to forget is drying. And when we were told to dry our hands, it wasn't about just taking a paper towel and just moving it all around your hands and garbling it up, because there was always the possibility that you were just mixing around germs if you missed any part of your hand. But what you did have to do was make sure that when you dried in an upward motion, which was considered to move the germs from cleanest area to dirtiest area, which was up your arm. You were told to not fluff sheets, because if you fluff sheets, potentially what particles that were on those sheets or those covers would spin in the air. You had to tuck the corner of your bed so it wasn't touching the floor. We had to do these things, and it seems simple. Even something as simple as not using the same washcloth for the face as you were using for the arms or other areas of the body. You had maybe 7 washcloths for one patient. I'm bringing all of that up to say because in the climate that we're in today, everything is equated to checklists. It's equated to did you do it opposed to did you do it correctly. I might have made a bed correctly, but if I fluffed the sheets in the process, then that could have did harm to somebody. I could have washed my hands correctly, but if I did not dry them correctly, then it puts me at risk. So my word today is that even something as simple as hand washing, doing it correctly has more value than just doing it at all. Drying your hands correctly is the other piece that comes with washing that has just as much impact as cleaning your hands. During this holiday season, as you're wanting a fellowship, be around others, that season may come, but it's going to go. And the question is will your health go with it? It also makes you question, if I am supposed to stay healthy, what behaviors do I need to practice that is going to be worthwhile more than a couple of days of celebrating? Because trust me, being sick for a couple of weeks is worse than is it worth the risk of having fun for that one day? It's possible to have fun, just do it safely.
Let me ask you this very quickly, because that is brilliant information. What is more sanitary? Air drying, the air blowers, or a clean paper towel?
A clean paper towel.
Okay. My grandmother told me that. Thank you.
Yeah, we swab those machines and they're nasty at times. So.
Okay. My grandmother Gertrude, who you just mentioned, who worked in the hospital, she was one of those ladies who would she was in food services, and she would bring the food to you. She said that. Whew. I mean, wow. Thank you for that. Thank you for that today. So during the holidays, I have like 10 seconds. You should just have a stack of paper towels for people when they wash their hands at your home.
I wouldn't quite say a stack. It would be nice to have something that's dispensable. If not, then having it on the road where they can just grab one is sufficient.
Okay. All right. Dr. Santita Knighton, everybody. Hey, Dr. Nina is her handle. Hey, Dr. Nina. You'll get these tips and so many others that you will find most useful in this season. Oh, I love you, everybody. Love you, Dr. Santita Knighton. Let's talk about the midterms. How did the Democrats do so well? Back in a minute. And then, everybody, we're going to be talking about slavery being on the ballot in 5 states. That's right. The amendment to the Constitution that ended slavery, Dr. Knighton, included in it an exception. If you were arrested and put in jail, essentially you went back to prison. That's the tragedy of our incarceration system today. And that having been said, the language is still on the books. The language is still on the books. where you are, in fact, a de facto slave when you go into prison. And so what you end up doing is working for corporations. And it's a Department of Justice, at least it used to be a Department of Justice program where you make 52 cents an hour. And some people who have fought for justice for these prison laborers have been, let's say they've been imprisoned. Yeah, you cannot make this stuff up. You can't. And that's why. So we're going to be talking about that today. It's very, very important for you to know exactly what is going on. What is going on? Dr. Knighton, you still there?
I am.
Yeah, 52 cents an hour. And so the changing the language, which is all over our constitutions, that was on the ballot in 5 states. It passed not unanimously, but it passed in 4 of 5 states. Not in Louisiana, though. I'm going to work on getting the legislator who wrote up this legislation. I'm going to work on getting him next week because what ended up happening was he stopped supporting it, and he stopped supporting it because he said, the language is tricky, and it will stand in the way of people being free. So it's something for us to think about. I think we need to really, 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 really need to think about that. So that'll be at the top of the hour, everybody. Okay, and waiting for my other guest to come up. Right now we're talking about these midterms. So, okay, who do I hear in the background?
Oh, that's Miss Santita.
Hey, Robert Patillo. Ooh.
Yes, ma'am.
We're going to be talking about this slave labor in a minute, but first I want to get your take on how the Democrats did so well, or did they do well, or did the Republicans do poorly? They say that the young people saved the Democrats once again. And young people, as we know, in the main are more progressive, more forward-thinking than even you are, because you're younger than I am. So I'm looking forward to talking with you about that. Because you have someone like Summer Lee who is really pushing back. She and Nina Turner had this dark money. They're very progressive, particularly on the Middle East issues. And they took a real hit. But
We
the
have
same
30
people,
seconds.
How many seconds?
30.
Okay. The same people who tried to take out Summer Lee and Nina, they came after Reverend. Same right-wing forces.
Mm-hmm.
Same right-wing forces. That's what I tried to tell Nina. I said,
We're about to go live. Please stand by. We have Attorney Patillo. We do not have the other guests. We do not have Miss Wells or Jones. They're not answering.
Okay, no worries. So we'll go right into this.
Change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, at the top of the hour, we're going to be talking about prison labor. That's right. Louisiana voters reject the ban on slavery and voluntary servitude. That is, slavery was on the ballot in 5 states in the midterms. And not unanimously, and in some cases not by overwhelming margins. The language of slavery, when you are no longer a slave, once you go into prison, you become a slave. That is in our Constitution. That was the exception to slavery when African Americans were freed from slavery. Louisiana kept that language on the books. And I want to know, what you think about that. That's at the top of the hour because it's still in our history. We've racialized slavery in the United States of America, but slavery is a reality all over the world. And we need to look at that today. We need to look at that today because it's something we're still debating in 2022. But now let's talk about the election. Everybody is saying, basically this is a victory for President Biden, that he is now taking a victory lap. What do you think about that? Is it a victory for him? Is it a victory for you? Did the Republicans do badly, or did the Democrats do that well? Or is it kind of somewhere in between? I mean, did people vote for parties or did they vote for people? Because, we're still trying to see what's going to happen in the House of Representatives, the People's House. It seems that the Republicans might have the edge there, and Democrats might have the edge in the Senate. What do you think, everybody? What about this red wave that did not happen? It was more like a ripple, kind of, sort of. Just things didn't really move. And these races were this close, one word, everybody, this close, and progressives prevailed. Progressives who have had a really tough time gaining traction over the decades. Well, in 2022, the squad is growing. And you have some progressives like Maxwell Frost, who's the first generation Zer, a former Uber driver who is now going to Congress. You have Summer Lee, someone who is a self-declared Black woman who is not going to back down in the face of dark money. They spent millions of dollars trying to stop this young woman from going to Congress. And she said, no, as a marginalized person, I identify and will defend marginalized people everywhere. And she has taken real heat for that. And yet she won. The people in her district voted for her, not the challengers. Neither one. So I want to know what you think. What's going on? We are pushing more and more progressives into the House of Representatives. So I want to know what your thoughts are. What about this dark money, this right-wing money that is not obedient to either party? They will use a Democrat or Republican to achieve their ends. What is going on, everybody? I want to hear from you. 773-763-9278. Got to talk with Robert Patillo. It's just Robert and I today. This is going to be fun because, boy, this has been quite the cycle. As we're watching the pundits, not even wring their hands. They're always wrong. Like, you guys are always wrong. You're always wrong. And yet you're celebrated and paid lots and lots of money to be wrong. They talk about the American public, but they don't live with them, Robert. And they don't talk with them. They just study them and go, they don't know what people are going through. They don't even know what gas costs. Just really, and what groceries cost and how people are struggling out here. What happened in this election? I mean, I know you were on the radio in the morning time on WAOK all week long, hearing from people. And then, of course, I know you got an earful to give us about what happened in Georgia with these split results, with Stacey Abrams losing and with Raphael Warnock now in a runoff with Herschel Walker. Let's start there. What happened to Stacey Abrams? Because did she lose support this time? What do you think she's going to be doing? What is her next move? Will she run for the Senate? Will she run for governor again? What's going on?
Well, she got over 1 million fewer votes this time than she did the first time she ran in 2018.
Say that again. What happened now? She got
over 1 million fewer votes, or not a million, over 100,000 fewer votes this time than she got last time in 2018. So in 2018, she got around 1,900,000 votes. This time she got around 1,800,000 votes to Brian Kemp's 2,100,000 votes. And if you look at the entire, and we're excluding Warnock from this because that's the federal office, but if you look at the entire list of statewide races in Georgia, and this is the part of the equation that many people are missing nationwide, there was a red wave on the state level across the country. In Georgia, you had every single statewide office going to the Republicans by a 200,000 vote margin. So you're talking about $2 million to $1,700 or $2 million to $1,800 for everything from Secretary of State, Attorney General, Insurance Commissioner, Agricultural Commissioner. Not only did Stacey Abrams get 100,000 fewer votes, she didn't even get the most votes among Democrats. She didn't even get the second most votes among Democrats. Jen Jordan, the candidate for Secretary of State, a white woman, got 1,800,022 votes. Then Charlie Bailey, the white guy running for lieutenant governor, got 1,800,000 and I think 11 votes. And then Stacey Abrams was third on the Democratic side with 1,800,007 votes as the tally goes currently. So not only did she lose support, she didn't even have the most support among Democrats. And I think that we have to go back to that culture war that got started in the middle of the campaign after her comment saying, well, if black men vote for me, then I'll win. And that set off an entire firestorm in the middle of September when she should have been concentrating on Brian Kemp. And that those differences in votes that we're seeing that's that number that you are that when we talked about the percentages of people who voted for Stacey Abrams, they remained about the same, but the turnout numbers ended up being significantly lower because of people who split ticket voted. So we're talking about if people voted for Democrats for lieutenant governor, but didn't vote Democratic for governor. People voted for Democrat for Secretary of State and the state attorney general, but didn't vote that way for the governor's office. And then, of course, we know Warnock outperformed every other Democrat with 1,900,048. I think the current number is in his election. So he got over 120,000 more votes than Stacey Abrams did. So I think when you take the numbers together, you have to say that the difference is her campaign. That the way that they ran it, the issues they decided to follow, the poll numbers that they decided to pay attention to, and when you look at a campaign that was that well financed, that had that much time to run, you have to do a post-mortem and ask difficult questions as to, well, how did you have 4 years to run? We got a lot of credit for registering the hundreds of thousands of people to vote in the state, but then lose 100,000 votes. Compared to the last election cycle. We have to make sure that whatever pollsters you hired, we don't hire them again. Whatever consultants you were consulting with, we don't consult with them anymore, because what happens in American politics is that you'll have these New York, D.C., L.A.-based political companies, and no matter how many races they lose, they keep getting millions of dollars every election cycle to run these campaigns. Meanwhile, those local organizers that can really pull you across the finish line end up not being financed. I think you remember we talk about this all the time back in March when I went on Tucker's show, and I said you have to hire local people in order to run these campaigns, because if you're running the perfect campaign for San Francisco, in Georgia, you're not going to win. I think that's in large part what ended up happening. Not having that ground game the way that Warnock had it, not having that suburban support the way that Jen Jordan had it, not having the support of law enforcement the way that Charlie Bailey had it as a former prosecutor, that the campaign in many ways just kind of did not take the proper political estimation about the current state of the electorate and how it's changed since 2018. And also I think they doubled down on the Hollywood part of the campaign far too heavily.
What do you mean?
That if you well, in midsummer, Brian Kemp rolled out an advertising campaign calling her Celebrity Stacy. So he talked about how she wanted to be in Hollywood more so than she wanted to be governor. He played the clip from her on Star Trek where she was the president of the World Federation, and used that in posters and advertisements. Where I would say it was a funny advertising campaign, but in the end, in reality, what it really did was prime the public for the fall when Stacey Abrams would come with Oprah and Lin-Manuel Miranda and Jennifer Lewis, and the Daily Show came to Georgia, and she was doing the Dougie and dancing at homecoming, that she played into that image of celebrity Stacey who just trying to be president more so than someone who was actually interested in the hard work of being the governor of Georgia, who really felt like being on a pig farm in Montezuma and talking to a farmer. And so when you run a campaign that is inept because it's not actually talking to the needs of that state, you're going to see that difference.
We're talking with Robert Patillo. Wow. Giving us a very interesting and unheard, or should I say really, it's an unheard postmortem on Stacey Abrams' campaign. So we were pulling for her so hard, and I'm still pulling for her because I think that she's got so much to offer as a public servant. And just like anything else, she has a lot to learn. We all have a lot to learn in this process. How many of us thought that this woman would get this close to becoming governor of Georgia in 2018 or even 2022? But but we have to, when we have these races, whether we win or lose, we have to walk away and look at what we've done well, and we have to look at what we did not do so well. And this is something that you predicted, that you foresaw. Well, you were in the midst of it, and people said that you were not being. People said that you were not being supportive, and I said, no, he's being a critic, but he's being a loving critic. And that's what she needs. She needs someone who's going to say, no, don't do that. And because really, what's interesting about politics is when you get these political consultants who are paid massive amounts of money. They come in and they look real sexy, everybody. I mean, they're dressed beautifully. They come to you with all the numbers. I know because I've lived it. I get it. I see it all the time. But it's the people on the ground who are known in the neighborhoods, who are known in the communities, who win races for you. They're the ones who say, that woman over there, she washes the clothes for over at Emory. And she knows a lot of people, and people love her. You need to talk to her because she's also the mother of the church. Am I not right?
You're absolutely correct.
And she carries a lot of weight in this here community. I know it's a community of little bungalows that look like they can be blown over by the wind. But let me tell you, this woman right here, she runs this area, and she runs her church of 100, 200, 500, 1,000, 5,000 people. Because the washerwoman in the weekday is the queen in the church on Sunday. Have I said something that makes sense to you?
That is the exact point. I think both of us had kind of the advantage of having, my dad was born in 1932. So I think being raised by that generation makes you a very direct person. And I think that this generation, for some reason, they believe that if someone is telling you something that you don't want to hear, that they're being critical of you, or they're being mean to you, or they're not helping you. When in reality, that's what you need to hear, the things you don't want to hear. When everyone is telling you what you want to hear, that's not the way that you make progress. And in this election, I think that there was a lot of telling people what they wanted to hear on both sides of the aisle, and because of that, you saw results that were not what we're expecting. About a week before the election, I was on with you, and I think it was me, you, and CK talking about the poll numbers and how it was turning badly for Democrats. And I said that not to really pay attention to the poll numbers because those only are doing landline phones for people who are answering the phone at home between 6 and 8 p.m. So you're not getting any young people on that. You're not getting any people who have recently changed states in the last 4 years. You're not getting people who aren't super voters to have voted in every election going back a decade or so. And that you're not getting African American voters or Latino voters, people who are transient, and that's what bore out on election day. So I think people have to learn to listen to folks who are being the critical voices of them, because those are the people who will help you get across the finish line at the end. Just listening to the people who tell you how great and wonderful you are at all times, that person isn't your friend. That's political advice and that's life advice. The critical person is not your enemy. The nice person is always your friend, because that's how you make progress.
Well, we're talking with Robert Patillo, of course, Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push, and host of his own show every Sunday from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time on WAOK. He, in fact, has been holding down the morning slot, and they have the right person to do it during this election season. And I think that you have got there's something to be said for the red wave on the state level, because that is how I think the Republicans might still, even if it's just barely, hold on to the House of Representatives. But that is not inconsequential, because the head of the House of Representatives is third in the line to the presidency. Robert?
Exactly. So when we talk about the failure of the red wave is very similar to the commentary this had on the Abrams campaign, that they started, as the old folks used to say, smelling themselves after the Biden poll numbers took a downturn at the beginning of the year. And so when it came to primary season, they really started believing they could run any crazed psychopath in the country, and that they would could just go MAGA, 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 talk about a few conspiracy theories and win. At the end of the day, the American people rejected that ideology. There was these extreme MAGA candidates that truthfully blew races across the country that should have been easy wins. Even if you look at the Warnock versus Walker race in Georgia, Herschel Walker 6 points behind Brian Kemp. So when we're talking about split ticket voting, that happens at every election, but very rarely do you have 6% of the electorate split ticket. Very rarely do you have nearly 200,000 people switch sides in an election, particularly an election of this magnitude. If you look at Pennsylvania, where Shapiro greatly outperformed Fetterman, but if it wasn't for Dr. Oz being such a horrible candidate, that's a race they easily could have won. And if you go around the country, you start realizing these extreme candidates have really cost Republicans this midterm. They could still end up not winning the House. They more than likely they won't win the Senate. And if you look at some of the other races, the Democrats didn't get across the finish line. They ended up being far closer than they had any business being. If the Democrats had invested in Mandela Barnes' race properly, he wins that race.
Mm-hmm. So what do you mean by that? Say that again, because this is something that Sherry Beasley said. She said, look, I need some help. She was within 1 point of the Trump-backed candidate. You had Mandela Barnes, because Charles Booker, who went from 5% name recognition in 2018 to almost being the nominee. But Chuck Schumer intervened in 2018 and put in an establishment candidate and took him out just barely. And I didn't see any evidence that the party coming out of D.C. supported Charles Booker fully. Mandela Barnes, they did it late. And, just tell me, what do you think happened here?
Well, the Democrats tend to pick and choose the races they want to get behind. They pick and choose who they think has an actual chance, and they're almost always wrong about it. If Mandela Barnes could have gotten maybe $10 million more from the National Party or from national fundraisers to really combat Ron Johnson's economic advantage in the closing days of the race, you would have seen that race flip. But the wind was at the back of Mandela Barnes. Ron Johnson's been a terrible senator, but even then, given the incumbency advantage he had in the red wave year there's no reason that race should have been that close. That was a credit to the Barnes campaign to make up that territory. But it was also an indictment on the National Democratic Party on not being able to support those candidates and get them off the finish line, across the finish line. Same thing with Sherry Beasley. You saw, interesting throughout the night, the kind of the wave of the way ballots are counted. first you get the absentee ballots, and that's where Sherry Beasley kind of jumped out to almost a 10-point lead early in the night. Then you start getting the suburban and rural voters in throughout the evening, and that's when Bud started making his comeback. And then towards the end, you get the big city votes in that are able to kind of push the Democrats a little bit closer. That's that vote that really responds to last-minute ad spending, to ground game. Those are your university students who vote on election day. Those are your folks who are working class, and so that's why you need that last-minute money from the National Party. And if you can invest in races like that instead of Tim Ryan in Ohio, where they're patting him on the back for
being Republican light.
Spitting distance. Yeah, he could be a Republican light because they would rather support that version of the future of the Democratic Party that can bring back the Rust Belt, quote unquote, as opposed to supporting progressive candidates like Mandela Barnes, who are going to rock the boat nationally. So I think this is an indictment on the party. But overall, if you were saying, was it something that Democrats won or something that Republicans lost? Is this somewhere right there in the middle, in the gray area?
Well, I think
on the one hand,
no, go on, please.
No, I was just going to say that on the one hand, Democrats did a lot to right the ship since midsummer, since they were able to pass the Inflation Reduction Act, student loan reform, marijuana decriminalization. Many of the things they've been able to push through the last few months have changed the national temperature in such a way that it gave the American people the ability to see past the current economic strife and say, well, at least it seems that we have competent leadership that are trying to get things done. Releasing oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to cut gas prices, stabilizing inflation that at one point was going up 5% a month, topping out at 9.5%, bringing that all the way down to 7.5% with progressive Fed policy. I think that really helped and at least opened the door for people to consider voting Democrat. And at the same time, Republicans just got crazier and crazier. After the Dobbs decision, Lindsey Graham introduces a nationwide abortion ban. Whose idea was that? Who thought that was a good idea? And so you get these crazy candidates in combination with Democrats putting points on the board. That's how you end up with the results you have, where Democrats still can win the House and Senate.
Wow. Everybody, what do you think about that? We're not hearing about that. And again, this is not to diminish Stacey Abrams and her efforts. This is a cautionary tale. Because when you can just look, if you have a cold, you don't need chemo. And if you have cancer, you don't need cold medicine. If you want to really deal with the problem, you got to know what the problem is so that you don't repeat the same mistakes. It's really that simple. And so, I think that there are lessons to be learned from this, because I think that Stacey Abrams, I think you would agree, Attorney Robert Patel, she's still a force in American politics, and we want her to be a force in Georgia politics, because all politics, it's local. If you're not relevant in your hometown, you are irrelevant. If you are not relevant in your neighborhood, you are irrelevant. Okay? So just think about that, everybody. Think about that. And let's and think about these Republicans. The Republicans are not out of it. If you continue to look at the news, the corporate news, they will tell you that the Republicans are out of it, and they're not. That's why they're in contention in the House. They didn't get swept out of power at the House. They're still in the mix. So think about that. Think about it. And think about these community centers that Republicans are putting in black and brown neighborhoods. Think about these black and brown candidates that they are now beginning to run, and they're going to continue to polish them up. And they're going to give some Democrats runs for their money. I know they're sending one my brother's way. I feel it. I see it. I saw the Republican meet and greets that were held in his district. It's happening, everybody. Problem is that I have with the Republicans is they don't have a plan that's going to help me. Think about that. Let's talk about involuntary servitude. Let's talk about slavery, which was on the ballot in 5 states. They ended that language in 4 states, but not in Louisiana. but it wasn't by huge margins in many places. So let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show back in just a minute. Slavery on the ballot in America in 2022. Ooh, Robert Patillo, thank you so much for that. Because, you know, people are not looking at that. I mean, they're just, they're not looking at that. And it's not that you don't like Stacey. In fact, you love Stacey. I wanted her to win. But I kept hearing that the canvassing, for example, that people were doing for Stacey in Chicago in 2018 was not happening. I heard that from more than one person. I mean, because it became, you know, campaigns like that are historic in nature become national campaigns. And we didn't feel that this time. And you know what? The Democrats know how to make a superstar, Robert. They know how to do that.
They can make a celebrity. They definitely can.
They can. They could have done that. They could have done that with Charles Booker. They could have done that with Mandela Barnes. They keep, you know, they could have done that. And the reason those men are not going to the U.S. Senate, Val Demings came out like a rocket. You mean to tell me you cannot figure out Val Demings and run her hard and give her all the money to take out Marco Rubio? You can't figure that out? Please. You deserve what you deserve. We're sitting up here waiting, biting our nails, trying to figure out who's going to be in the majority. I mean, I just can't help but feel that maybe this is what y'all want.
Well, also the National Party just did Val Demings no favors. None. Because we talked about this for 2 years that Democrats for some reason think that Latinx is a thing. It is not. It's just something that some academics made up. And it's more so than Latinx not existing. The whole concept of Latino and Hispanic doesn't really exist. These people have individualized countries that they come from, individualized ethnic backgrounds that they come from. We never just lump all white people together and say European, because that's just not the way things work. And because Democrats just look at Hispanic voters as Latinx, they are listening to their couple people in their focus group who say they represent the Latino community, and then all they do is say immigration, Trump's racist, and they leave it at that. And we've seen those numbers among Hispanic and Latino and Latinx voters, whatever the title is. Stacey Abrams got 50% of the Hispanic vote, meaning 50% voted for Kemp after he did a deportation truck ad in the last election. If you look at Florida, Miami-Dade County went GOP for the first time in 20 years because Hispanic and Latino and Latinx voters are not responding to the Democratic message. Why? Well, because you've been promising them comprehensive immigration reform for 20 years and never do it.
Well, I mean, not to mention the fact that, you know, when you go to Florida, those are the white Latinos, okay? You understand what happened with Cuba. I'm not, look, I mean, and I've talked to many Cuban Americans. Some of them are my dear friends. And I'm like, hey, I got a Cuban story too, because my grandmama used to work in Havana. Because back in the 30s and the 40s, the borders were porous. Florida didn't really become a state until Disney got down there, everybody. And black folks, brown folks, Ashkenazi Jews, and everybody else, they were all jumping on the boat and going through the Caribbean and South and Central America, and they were working. And that's what my grandmother did. Okay, and the darker you were, the more likely it was that that's what was going to happen to you. That's why what Mary McLeod Bethune did with Bethune-Cookman College down in Florida was so revolutionary. Because black folks did not have options down there. Am I lying? You know I'm telling the truth.
Yeah, so right after my wife Stacey, her grandmother has a very similar story of taking the boat back and forth from Jamaica to Cuba to Florida to sell tobacco. So it's a lot of black families have that connection. And I think because Democrats can't understand the difference between the different Latino groups, and they also that These people are very strong religious families and Catholics. Roe versus Wade is the number one issue that's not really appealing to that group. So they have to do better at knowing their audience.
And you need to know that when you go up the coast, when you talk to the Latino community, the Hispanic community, which is a culture, everybody, when you talk to them in New York, many of them are black. So, and then when you go west, you're dealing with indigenous people and Mexicans. You mean you have a lot going on here? It's not just. But when you go to Miami, these are the white Latinos, which is why their politics skew so far to the right, and it's just the truth. And I told a very well-known Cuban American pundit that because she was going to say something funny to me. I said, no, sis, I got a story about Cuba. Because when the first time I went to Havana, my grandma Gertrude described the Hotel Havana. She described Havana. She said, when you make this right down this street, you're going to see this. And when you go down here, it happened to my sister and it happened to me, and it blew our minds. And she could remember Havana that well. She knew it because she used to work there. Chopping sugar cane, picking beans. Yeah, she did that. Don't talk to me. And when you go to Hawaii, when you go down to Florida, you feel that. You feel the racism. You feel the colorism. You absolutely feel it. You can have it. Yeah, I said that.
Another factor that people have not been looking at is you have to look at the returns also. And when you're talking about Florida, Val Demings, little Charlie Crist, the returns that came out of Little Haiti. There's a massive Haitian American population in Florida. And when you look at what happened at the border, they did all that to say, oh, we didn't whip those Haitians at the border. Those pictures ain't go nowhere. And people talk and people hear things. And, my mom was born and raised in Haiti, and that woman keeps a grudge like nobody's business. Haitians also just be forgetting about things and forgiving a couple months later. And so you saw a huge amount of crossover vote with Haitian Americans, particularly first generation.
Absolutely. Hold on one second. Who do we have?
We have about 20 seconds, 25, and we have Attorney Fancher and Dwight McKee on.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have to have another talk about this because this is a lot. Because my grandmother's experience in.
Stand by. We're about to go live.
It was so awful she wouldn't talk about it.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, Friday, November 11th, 2022. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station at AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I am Santita Jackson. It is a joy to be with you today. I want you to meet me on Twitter at Santita J. Meet me over here on my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Everybody like and share. And the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. That's the only page I've got. The other one is a landing page, and they won't let anybody else be a part of that. But please, if you want to be my friend, please, and I want you to be my friend, please go to Santita Jackson and Friends on Facebook, but meet us over on YouTube on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Let's talk about slavery. Slavery ended in 1865, right? 1870, the Slavery Amendments, 13th, 14th, and 15th. Not quite. Slavery was on the ballot in 5 states in 2022. And it cleared the bar. That is, this language that would ban slavery was actually ratified in 4 of the 5 states, but not in Louisiana. What happened and what is going on? Because it's not like these measures passed by overwhelming margins. It did not happen like that. So I want to know what your thoughts are about slavery and how we really feel about it. Now, in America, we've racialized it, but slavery exists everywhere, all over the world. And so I want to know what you really, really think about it and what you think about these slave amendments and why slavery is still with us. That's how we built the country. When we say, America was built by immigrants, that is not exactly true. The fact is, America was first built on stolen land by stolen people who worked not for free, but they were unpaid for their labor and their expertise. And we're still doing that. We don't like to pay people today. We don't like to pay our farm workers, the people who work at the frontline workers. We don't do that. We're still taking bets on folks who work in the chicken factory. When the pandemic begins, we're going to see who's going to die. Think about that. Think about it. Think about 52 cents an hour that many prison laborers are paid today to make your jeans, to make your lingerie. Think about that. Many of our nation's corporations use prison labor to make their products that they sell to us. Oh, absolutely. Let's talk about that on the Santita Jackson Show. 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. Chicago will have a high of 50 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 32 degrees will be the high. It will be cloudy, cold, as John Coleman here on Channel 7 used to say. In the NFL, the Panthers 25, the Falcons 15. In the NBA, the Timberwolves will be facing off against the Grizzlies. Our Bulls will have a night off. In the NHL, the Kings 2, Chicago 1, and the Wild will be playing the Kraken tonight. Everybody, let us wish our veterans, the men and women who serve us in the military space, let us wish them well today. Give them all of our love. This is a federal holiday in which we honor the men and women who have served us in the armed forces. Regional observances and events are set to take place all around the country today. And you can go to all U.S. national parks for free today. So everybody, tell a veteran that you love them today. Sending them much love, thinking of my grandfathers today, both of whom were veterans, everybody. The votes are still being counted in critical House and Senate races that will decide who controls Congress next year. In the race for the Senate, election officials say it may take hours or days to count more than 500,000 votes remaining in Arizona and 95,000 remaining votes in Nevada. Republicans need to pick off 2 more Democratic seats to win the Senate majority. We'll see, because the Democrats are leading in Arizona. And, well, not in Nevada, but it's getting close. It's getting closer, everybody, in Nevada. And we're still waiting for the runoff December 6th in Georgia. So we will see. Many of these races are still being decided as we speak, because the votes are still being counted. Be patient, everybody. A federal judge has struck down President Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness program, declaring it illegal. Biden's program was already on hold due to a separate legal challenge, but a new lawsuit filed by a conservative group will delay student loan relief even further. On Thursday, a Texas federal judge who was nominated by then-President Donald Trump found that the executive branch does not have clear congressional authorization to create the student loan forgiveness program. These are the only loans that cannot be renegotiated, everybody. Well, our own Senator Dick Durbin did say during the financial crisis of 2008, he said, hey, the bankers run the place. I guess they run that too. At least 4 people have been killed after Nicole hit Florida's eastern coast as a Category 1 hurricane this week. Indeed, Daytona, Florida is completely flooded out. Praying for our brothers and sisters down there today. Those are some of the headlines. We're still fighting for financial freedom, everybody. I want you to reach out to Team Hochberg. Do you use a debit card? You really shouldn't. You need a credit card. You say you don't have enough credit? Well, you need a plan so that you can get off that debit card and get you a credit card. Do you have massive credit card debt? Don't negotiate with those credit card companies yourself. You need to have Team Hochberg do that for you. Do you want to buy a house? Do you want to buy a building in your neighborhood? Think about it. You can do that, but you need to have a plan. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And we are planning on success here. If you want to purchase your home, refinance your home, if you want a VA and FHA loan, all of these financial products that you might not think you have access to, well, Team Hochberg is going to point you in the right direction and help you to eliminate your debt, help you to build your credit, help you to get on the road to financial freedom. Tom and Sonia, 17 credit cards, everybody. It could happen to anyone. $100,000 worth of debt on those credit cards. 2 kids trying to hold on to their house. Well, they almost lost their house, and they almost lost their minds over this $100,000 in credit card debt. So they reached out to Team Hochberg for this free consultation. Then Team Hochberg returned to them with a plan. Tom and Sonia followed the plan. They're out of debt. Their credit card payments were reduced by almost $3,000 a month, $2,800 a month, and they were able to save their homes, and they were able to get an FHA loan. That could happen to you. That could happen for you. Believe me, there's nothing too hard. If you think that, I just have an average job, I'll never be able to afford that home, I'll never be able to afford that building, that's not true. So call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID. Give them a try. Give yourself a try. Give yourself a break. 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com. Go there and get on the road to financial freedom. Everybody, 4 states voted to abolish slavery, but not Louisiana. 5 states had slavery on the ballot in 2022. You say, well, wait a minute. I thought we dealt with that after the Civil War. No, we did not. Indeed, so much of so many materials that we use are made by prison laborers. That's right, for 52 cents an hour, maybe at the most in many places. So what about that? Because these prison laborers, and I've been through the South, Dwight McKee, attorney Mark Fancher, and attorney Robert Patillo, where I have seen these prisoners who work in the homes of prominent citizens. They do they might be their cooks. They might be they take care of their lawns. It's amazing when you go into certain places. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. These people are walking around every day and they're trusted enough to be in folks' homes to take care of their homes. And yet they're prison labor. And when they tried to organize and when they've tried to unionize, many of them have been put in isolation. Yeah, so we need to talk about that. 4 states voted to abolish slavery, but not Louisiana. And indeed, the author of the bill in Louisiana said, look, the language is so confusing. I want to withdraw and step back and rewrite this so that we will have no ambiguity. So what do you think about this, everybody? What about slavery in America? It's still here. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Alabama voted on a constitutional amendment proposal that will eliminate racist language from their state constitution and delete an exemption that allows for involuntary servitude for certain crimes. Tennessee voters considered a constitutional amendment to remove slavery as punishment for a crime and replace it with the sentence, slavery and involuntary servitude are forever prohibited. Vermont voters voted on a proposal to remove language that allows for slavery and involuntary servitude, while also saying that slavery and indentured servitude in any form are prohibited. Oregon voters approved a measure to remove slavery as punishment for a crime and add language that allows an Oregon court or probation and parole agency to order an alternative for those incarcerated for their sentencing. But it's still on the books in Louisiana. So how did we get here? Let's just start there. Let's start with you, Attorney Mark Fancher. What do you make of these proposals? Because Louisiana rejected this proposal, and but this is not a Southern thing. This is an American issue, Mark Fancher.
Well, it very much is, and it's baked into what America is all about. This, as you mentioned in the lead-in, this is a country that has, in my opinion, no moral right to exist, in the sense that it rests on stolen territory. It has been built up off the backs of human beings who have been kidnapped and enslaved. And in many ways, it has established the culture, the orientation, the climate, the atmosphere racially for this country, and it has never really changed. And at bottom, it has not really been so much about the concept of enslaving other human beings. It has been more about the advantage, maintaining the dominance of a certain class of people originally, individuals and individual families. And in more recent years, they have been replaced by major corporations, the capitalist class. They're the ones who now are occupying the position of the so-called founding fathers and others who were actually wealthy white slave owners. and people who otherwise profited and benefited from having these people engaging in labor. And so one of the characteristics of capitalism generally, whether it's in a more primitive form, as at the beginning of the history of the United States, or whether it is in the form that it's in now, which is far more sophisticated and global and imperialistic, is that there's always an angle that is intended to preserve power, increase profits, and in order to do that, sometimes it's necessary to be very deceptive. And so while we look at the so-called abolition of slavery in 1865, I think there are, very important writers and scholars and others, most notably Douglas Blackman, who have shown that slavery never left us, even in its most base and vile form. It did not leave us until well into the 20th century, because after abolition, you had the perpetuation of slave conditions through what was called the convict lease system, which is where local law enforcement in the South would go and they would arrest African people on spurious charges and then rent them out to plantation owners to perform slave labor. Then you had the system of sharecropping, or the debt tenancy system, where formerly enslaved people were duped into continuing to work the land, but in the course of their early years of labor, were forced into debt to the plantation owner, so that they were never able to work their way out of this debt. At the end of harvest season, when they accounted for the money that they made from their crops, somehow they always owed the plantation owner more than they had. So the family was required to remain on the plantation for yet another growing season. And this went on for generation after generation after generation, so much so that when my family used to drive from our home in Nashville, Tennessee, to my grandmother's home in Birmingham, Alabama, when we would travel those backcountry roads in Alabama, my mother would point out these little shacks in the fields and explain to me that these were Black people who had been living in those shacks trying to pay off the white man's debt since the 1860s. So this is real, and we haven't even talked about the use of chain gangs during that period, and more recently, what you alluded to in terms of prison labor that's used by the major corporations. So slavery is a very recent phenomenon for us, and what many people don't grasp, I think, or pause to think about, is that it really was not ancient history, even the pre-1865 version of slavery, because I was born in 1958. Slavery was supposedly abolished in 1865, which means that at the time of my birth, there were people who were still on this planet who had been held in bondage, and that's not that long ago. And it has impacted, Black communities in particular, in ways which have been devastating. When we talk about things like self-hatred and confusion and misinformation and lowered aspirations and real problems with self-esteem, it has been a devastating thing. And I could go on and on about the resistance to the efforts to try and purge the country of all of this. But I will pause here for other comments.
Call us at 773-763-9278. Did you know that slavery was on the ballot in 2022? Indeed, this is something that I brought to you a couple of months ago. It was voted on in 5 states, and it passed the removal of this language that would allow slavery or indentured servitude. Interestingly, in a very white state, they put that in there because whites were indentured servants. But it didn't pass in Louisiana because the author of this bill, and he meant well. He said, when I dug down in the language, because the language is always a compromise, he said, something is not right here. So let me go back and let's revisit this. Before I get some comments from you, Robert Patillo, Dwight McKee, your thoughts.
It's not the language, it's the system. It's the prison industrial complex is the margin of profit for capitalism. And it's the way we compete with China and Korea and Asia on economic terms. It's built into the system. It is the system. And it's set up in such a way that they lock us in it. For example, when we came out of slavery, Robert, we were the ones that understood the trades, dealt with the trades, built the cities, built the major institutions, built the railroads. But then they took the trades out of the schools. So now our kids can't learn the trade. But the only way they learn the trade is when they go to prison, they teach them a trade. They only learn trades in the prisons, and then they employ them to work for the Gap or work for Apple or work for the industrial complex in the prisons for 50 cents an hour. Then when they get out of jail, they go to get a job at the same place at Apple, and they tell them, well, you can't work here doing the same thing because you've been in jail. And so the only way you can exercise your skill set is in the prison industrial complex. So it's built into the system. They used to have some songs about it. One was Sam Cooke said it's the sound of the men working on a chain gang because it's part of the culture.
Wait, Dwight. Let me interrupt you here, because my father said the most painful thing, one of the most painful things for them to witness was if, after men would be out working during the week, they might, after they got paid, go out and get a drink and have some fun, and then they'd be arrested. And their families would wake up to see their fathers and their sons and their brothers on the chain gang working in front of their homes.
By design.
Yeah.
Because they needed the labor base. And they would lease the prisoners out for at a discounted rate, and everybody would get paid and make money except the prisoners. They also used to talk about 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day old and deep in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me because I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. It was built into the system because we've always been the margin of profit in capitalism. That's why they bought us here, and that's why they maintain us in bondage.
I can't wait to get your thoughts on this, Attorney Robert Patillo. Let's talk about slavery in America. It is still here, and it's still been on the books. It was voted on in 2022, everybody. What do you think about that? When you say the struggle is not over, when you think the struggle is not real, I hope you'll meet us on Keep Hope Alive this weekend, on Sunday from 7 to 9 Central Standard Time. Go to iHeartRadio so that you can do that, and meet us over at Rainbow Push at 930 East 50th Street tomorrow. And of course, on Monday and Tuesday, we will be in Detroit at our Automotive Summit, looking to create opportunities for people in the automotive industry. I'm Santita Jackson. Can't wait to hear from you. 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. Are you surprised? Are you surprised that slavery has still been on the books in the United States of America? Are you surprised that this is something we still have to vote on? Are you surprised that the votes were not unanimous? No way. No way. So I want to talk with you. 773-763-9278. 773-763 WCPT, the Santita Jackson Show. All right, we're still on Facebook Live, so you all can start talking. Now, Robert, remember, I'm coming to you right after the break. But, I mean, are you surprised that this was on the books? And it's something that this was not a talking point, Robert and Mark and Dwight on any of the talk shows. No one talked about it at all.
Well, the truth is, at the end of the day, white progressives and white conservatives are still united in whiteness, and they don't like making a point out of America's racialized history, because once you start talking about slavery still being on the ballot, then it makes it more difficult to make the argument that slavery was so ancient ago that now you can't give reparations today. And I think even the quote-unquote liberals and progressives did not want to start having a national conversation on reparations in the middle of their election, because black folks have to keep waiting until the cows come home to have because their issues are still too controversial. Let's just appreciate the fact that in America, transgender marriage became mainstream before reparations did. That the idea of hating black people is so against the manifest weight of American history and the socioeconomic zeitgeist on both sides of the aisle, that pretty much any American policy will be accepted nationally before you get to the point of accepting slavery as being slavery and reparations being a conversation which begin.
And the primary beneficiaries of those are their pension funds. The ones that have the benefits of this slave system of the prison industrial complex are those who invested in Apple and invested in Gap. It is the pension funds. And so most of middle class Americans and upper class Americans live off the prerogatives of the benefits that come out of this disparity in pay and disparity of the economy of the prison industrial complex. So if you collapse that, you collapse many of these people's 401ks. They are the primary benefactors of it, and they invest in stock based on the benefits based on the actuaries of the prison industrial complex. Not just invest in the prison stocks, but the stocks in the corporations that the prisoners work in behalf of these major corporations.
Does anyone have any response?
Well, I think also that there is just, incredible self-delusion. And, it's on some level, some feelings of guilt among the many people who are beneficiaries of all of this. They like to think that, I'm a good person. I would never enslave anybody. I would never do this. I would never do that. But on some level, they know that the advantage that they were born with, the privilege that they enjoy just by virtue of their racial identity.
We have about 30 seconds.
The enslavement of people, both in the past and currently. And to continue to talk about this is a reminder of the benefits that they have derived from this whole thing. And
stand by, please.
In terms of that.
Hold on one second.
About it.
We're coming in.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. 773-763-9278. 773-763-WCPT. WCPT 820. The nation's largest progressive talk radio station, my home station, and AM 950 radio. the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want to hear your thoughts, everybody. Meet me on Twitter at SantitaJ, and on my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, and on my Facebook page, Santita Jackson and Friends. Let's talk about slavery in America. You say, wow, that was so long ago. No. It was on the ballot in 5 states in 2022. And these votes were not unanimous, everybody. Everybody didn't want to get rid of that language. And Louisiana, which emanated this particular iteration of this bill, well, they voted it down. They said no. And in fact, the author of the bill withdrew support. He said, because the language, as I dug down into it, would still allow for slavery. So what do you think about this, everybody? I mean, I know slavery it's a riveting topic for us. We want to hear it, kind of, but we don't want to discuss it. You know, many people will listen today, but they'll say, you know, can we not get past this? No, we can't. No. You know, until people are treated justly, until you do restore and repair, no, you can't get past it. No. And everybody in the United States came here trying to get past injustice that they had to absorb back in Europe, for example, in the main, because that's our main narrative. So nobody wants to get over it. And then everybody else who came here behind that. No. We're going to have to make these things right here. And we can. But we're going to have to grow up in our politics and grow up in how we want to treat one another. We have to do that in order to make this right. We've got Dwight McKee, Dr. D, social scientist, and of course, brilliant lawyer, attorney Mark Fancher, the author, and great essayist. I'm so glad that he's with us today. And of course, the Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push, talk show host on WAOK every Sunday. You'll hear him this Sunday from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. Robert Patillo, Attorney Robert Patillo, are you surprised by these 5 states that were still dealing with slavery? It was on the ballot in the midterms, but that certainly was not a talking point.
I'm surprised they decided to deal with it at all, quite frankly, because slavery has always been baked into the American system and capitalism in general. It's impossible in a system of finite resources to have some people have spaceships without other people being slaves. That's just the way that the money works. If one person wants to have enough money to buy Twitter just for the heck of it, then someone else has to be enslaved in that same system because you have a finite set of resources that are allocable. What we're seeing is that they are taking the formality out of it, but it seems very much that these are ceremonial because the states will still have the ability, depending on how the state level legislation is written, to have prison labor. That if you are simply paying somebody a de minimis amount, well, that's not technically slavery, but it's still a de minimis amount that operates in a similar fashion. In reality, we have to, attack felony disenfranchisement, which still exists in this country, which many states use to stop people who were previously incarcerated from being able to exercise their franchise, from being able to vote. There's nothing constitutional about it. It is something that was created under the same Jim Crow system, so that if you wanted to limit the number of black people who vote, you just go and arrest a bunch of them, convict them for some specious crimes, and now they're all off of the ballot. And if you look at the fact that even in the states where you are doing this kind of perfunctory ending of slavery, quote unquote, the percentages weren't that great. As you said, Louisiana voted it down. Some areas it was 60, 70% support, but that still means you got 25, 30, 40% of the state being in favor of slavery.
Yes.
Until America addresses its original sin of slavery and offers the reparative measures needed to pay recompense for what they did, this will always be an issue in America. And America simply wants to sweep it under the carpet because it's a lot easier to pretend it never happened than it is to address it and fix the damage done by it.
Why do you think it came up now, Robert? Why do you think it was brought up now? It didn't just come up.
I think after the summer of 2020, when you had so many uprisings around the country, everyone wanted to start doing the perfunctory to look like you're doing something. So in Georgia, we we outlawed the state's citizens arrest law that was used to kill Ahmaud Arbery. We've seen anti-lynching legislation be passed around the country, those sorts of things. I think this falls in line with that, where it looks like you did something to help Black people without actually addressing the issues. I think that if you ask the majority of Black folks in this country, if you had left these laws on the books, but instead sent out reparation checks to families, they would have taken the reparations instead. But this is America's way of beating around the bush.
What do you think? Why do you think this is up? Why do you think this has come up now? Why do you think this has been brought forward now, Mark Fancher?
Well, I think for all the reasons that that Robert mentioned, but also I think that people really need to realize that they're playing with fire. When you start talking about amending constitutions and things, you better be really sure that that's not going to open up a Pandora's box. Because we have to be aware of the times that we're living in. The MAGA culture is not limited to the adults who do things like charge the Capitol or who try and kill Paul Pelosi. They have children. And in 2021, in Missouri, there were high school students who were posting on social media petitions to bring back slavery. And I know that in the high schools across the country, and I know in Michigan where I live, where I get reports of this all the time, some of the levels of racism among the young are breathtaking in terms of what they want. So, we have to be careful about these discussions that we start to make sure that they're going to end in a way that was intended. But beyond that, I also, am interested by the fact that, as I said during the break, that there are many people who are in denial about slavery generally. And if they want to deal with it, they do want to deal with it in the most perfunctory of ways. I know that one aspect of the 13th Amendment, deals with the idea of prohibiting not just slavery itself in its rawest form, but also the quote-unquote badges and incidents of it. And that should be a fertile place for attacking discrimination of many different kinds. Specifically, we attempted to use it in Michigan when we attacked the emergency manager law, which basically placed in the hands of an individual appointed by the governor all power of local governments. And the point that was made is that you essentially robbed the people who voted elected officials into office of the power of their vote by doing that, and essentially made them political placeholders in order to advance an agenda of a governor who gave us the Flint water crisis and other things. And that was really in no way different from the way that enslaved people were used as political placeholders during the early years of the country. If you look at Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, it refers to the fact that enslaved people count as 3/5 of a human being. That was not just for purposes of being insulting. It was a recognition of the fact that white people were sparsely populated the southern regions, and that when it came to congressional apportionment, in order for them to be dealt with fairly with respect to more densely populated areas in the north, they needed more bodies to count. And so they were allowed to count their enslaved people as 3/5 of a person for purposes of apportionment. We made the connection and said that this is really the same. When you have black people in Detroit going to the polls and voting for their city council and for their mayor, and then you give all of the power that their elected officials have to one individual, it's really a charade. It's really very much like that. And the response of the court in that case was very similar to the way that the courts respond whenever the 13th Amendment is invoked. It's a very nervous reaction. It's a very tentative reaction. They really don't want to go there. And they have been very clear that the only time that they want to deal with this concept of badges and incidents of slavery is when what has surfaced is a form of slavery which is very similar to what existed prior to 1865. because they're very nervous about it. They don't like the idea and the concept, and really pulling back the curtain and showing that in so many ways, the experiences of African people in the United States is very similar to what their ancestors experienced during the period of enslavement, is something that they do not want to do.
Why do you think they not want to do it?
Oh, consider the implications. I mean, this country loves to think that, it has progressed so much, that it has come so far away from that period of enslavement, an ugly, dark past, and that we now live in a racially enlightened era when we can elect a Barack Obama, and things are just getting better. And it's not so much that they just have this desire for racial harmony. It's really an attempt to reconcile a lot of contradictions and personal feelings that they have of guilt about, their knowledge, their awareness on some level, that their privilege, that the benefits that they enjoy, the dominance that they enjoy in this country is rooted in a history of enslaving other human beings, and that all of that flows from that, and that it's maintained for them by the perpetuation of conditions which are very comparable to those which existed during the slave period, not just with respect to forced labor, but just in terms of control of populations. This entire phenomenon of police brutality and racial profiling is very comparable to what existed during the period of enslavement. The slave codes, the laws that governed slavery back during that period, required that those who were enslaved, when they went from plantation to plantation on errands, that they carry certain credentials and documents, and that white people were officially deputized and authorized to stop them, check their credentials. It was common knowledge that these people had to be watched, and surveillance had to be maintained on them at all times. That when they congregated, that those group meetings and discussions had to be broken up. They could not be allowed to even play drums because they might communicate with each other and create insurrections and things like that. So this is hardwired into the culture and the way that America functions. You got to watch those people all the time. And when they display even the hint of some type of rebellion, or they in some way react to injustice, you must beat them. You must beat them into submission so that they are managed and controlled. And that's very much a part of the culture of policing and the broader country. I mean, most communities in some way believe that these people have to be watched and beaten and controlled. And we see, even among non-police, the existence of the so-called Karen. That's a frame of mind, a way of thinking, which is still with us in many ways, and they don't want to admit that.
Dwight McKee, your thoughts? I mean, Alabama, Louisiana, Vermont, Oregon, and Tennessee. This is not confined to the South, Dwight. This is Vermont. This is Oregon.
Well, the big problem is that they build it, and now they build it into our culture. Part of what the artists are complaining about and taking a position on is that the same people who are invested in the music industry and the film industry is invested in the prison industrial complex. And so they made gangsterism and gangster rap and
prison clothing.
Prison clothing part of our culture as if it is normal, as if it is our destiny to end up in jail. And it is the natural order of things. And so it's insidious now. It's at a point now, Robert and Mark, that our children have been so catechized by the notion that their destiny is jail, that they prepare themselves. It's now to go to jail. It's now a rite of passage.
Wait a minute, Dwight.
Not told it.
Jail and the pole for women. And mind you, I am not diminishing, Dwight, women who are in that industry, not diminishing them at all. What I am saying, though, is that was as we were coming out of slavery, we avoided that like the plague, Dwight. Because we were not going to be violated sexually anymore. Black men had no rights a white man was bound to respect, but black women had no virtue a white man was bound to respect either. And we went in that direction, and it was a decent direction, and it was a direction that got us Tulsa and other Tulsas all around the country. It was a successful direction. But now we're in the opposite direction, Dwight. And it's killing us. And the rest of the culture, by the way.
Well, when you control the images, you control the culture. And so now our kids have been controlled by images that has refined the culture in such a way is they think that prison is their destiny. And it's a rite of passage. And the only way you can have street credibility, as they call it, is having gone to jail or committed some crime. And so they've taken the notion of slavery and the prison industrial complex and build it into the psychology of our children in such a way is now it helps define the culture. It has become a reference point for their self-concept and how they see themselves, particularly young black boys. The whole culture of rap and gangster rap has become a prerequisite to the joint. And if you raise that question, right now the turns on you because somehow they see that as a racist position to tell the truth. That there are people who benefit and perpetrate the notion of our children being criminals and going to jail.
Robert, what does it say? That four out of five measures passed, but there was debate. I mean, it's not like they passed by these overwhelming majorities. 99% say no to slavery. No, it didn't happen that way, Robert. What does that say about the culture today? Robert Patillo? I think he's still there. Well, let me go back to you, Mark. What does it say about the culture today? That the vote, these measures were not passed in all these 4 states except Louisiana by overwhelming margin. In Louisiana, it failed. What does that say about where we are today in 2022?
I think it says what we have been talking about, that this country is still very conflicted and confused and frightened by its own history, and would rather just not deal with it, and would rather just presume that things are fine the way that they are, and to go back and to try and enact legislation or to amend the Constitution would imply that there is something wrong. And we don't want to admit that there's anything wrong. And there's great fear of it. I mean, and the fear of slavery, the reluctance to deal with it, is not limited to just the white community. I think we really need to acknowledge that there are so many African people born in the United States who are terribly afraid to take an honest look at it because they presume that what actually happened during the slave era reflects badly on their ancestors and on them.
And we're ashamed. And we're ashamed. I'm like, wait. We're not the ones who should be ashamed. I am proud of my ancestors for surviving that. I appreciate Jewish people saying, we survived the Holocaust. They're like, and they had to deal with unspoken humiliations in the Holocaust. Unspoken humiliations. The same kind of humiliations that we had to endure in slavery. Their women had to cut all kinds of deals with these Nazi officers to try and keep their families alive. I know because I have friends whose families survived it. But their survivors were victims, Mark. I think we got to flip that.
And what they would find if they looked at the actual history, John Hope Franklin did us a great service.
Yes.
He wrote a book with a co-author called Runaway Slaves. And what that book does is it goes back and takes actual documents from that era, newspaper reports, diaries, journal entries, runaway slave posters, and all of those kinds of things. And what he does very skillfully is he shows that it's not that we just survived that we were actively fighting it aggressively every step of the way. That sometimes it took the form of outright insurrections where we would go to war against plantation owners. Sometimes it was individual acts of resistance, such as setting fire to crops, breaking up farm equipment, putting poison in the master's food, or just running away from the plantation. And that the slave-owning population lived in terrible fear of these people.
Wait, like Martha Washington. George Washington's wife said, "Why did you leave these people to me? They hate me." And she was fighting to death on Mount Vernon.
And it explains in many ways their violent treatment of these people, because they were trying to terrorize them into submission. And it just did not work because they were fighting very hard all the time. And so for many of their descendants, they're ashamed because they think that these people sat back and acted like the characters in Gone with the Wind, that they were just singing songs to the massa while they were picking cotton and just loving every minute of it, when in fact they were trying to figure out how to get the master off by himself so that they could slash his throat. And so I think that people would have a new level of pride in their ancestors if they looked at what they were actually doing. And let's not even talk about the Civil War and the role that African men played in turning the tide and winning that war for the Union. Because basically what happened is that they bided their time. It took a while before Lincoln relented and allowed them to actually bear arms and to go to fight. But the proposition was laid out before these men that, look, you're giving me a gun and you're telling me that I can go and kill the man who raped my mama? Give me the gun. Give me the gun right now. And they fought with such valor, with such determination, such passion, that the North could not help but win that war. And yet, it's still Abraham Lincoln who's given credit for having set us free. I mean, this country, this society takes away even our even our victories. They will give us absolutely nothing.
And that's why we have to take it.
Nobody wants to come to terms with it.
And that's why we have to take it. Dwight, I've got about 30 seconds.
But the difference is that they didn't have the illusion of inclusion. Our people, what they've done successfully with us is they dangle 4 or 5 Negroes in front of us and say you could be like this. And so it's created a bipolarity in us, but we don't know whether we are included and free or on the other side of slavery. In many cases, we're both. And so we don't have that same resolve for freedom because we can't figure out in many ways whether or not we're still enslaved or free. When all the statistics and all of the facts demonstrate that we are still enslaved and not much different than we were in 1864.
Well, with all due respect, I think I have to disagree. I think that we've made a tremendous amount of progress, but we have so much further to go because this is so deeply ingrained in the DNA of the country. It is. And America's not going to be right until we deal with this, until we deal with indigenous people and the injustices against them. It's not going to be right. And America can be great, but it will only be great when you make things right with the people you have wronged. Think about that, everybody. Our ancestors worked very hard. I mean, come on. Denmark Vesey, Nat Turner, Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman. No. They worked real hard and they made a lot of progress. Fannie Lou Hamer made a lot of progress. These folks made a lot of progress. Du Bois told us about our duality, and we keep getting told over and over again what the deal is. Pay attention to John Hope Franklin. Pay attention to Du Bois. Pay attention to Jesse Jackson while you still got him alive. Pay attention. Read about Malcolm X. Read what Dr. King wrote. It's all there. Dorothy Height. It's all there. It's all there. And it's not just for Black people, it's for all of us. See you on Monday. See you on Sunday on Keep Hope Alive. God bless. You all want to get some closing thoughts in on Facebook Live? I'm going to have to run out of here real fast, but this is a tough topic for Black people to tackle. I can see always, and oftentimes when I was on another station, which was a Black station, people would ask me why I'm dealing with it. They would ask me why I would want to deal with colorism and why I'd want to deal with this. Wow. So some closing thoughts?
I mean, I don't have much to say, and I have to leave as well, but I think that it just really highlights a lot of the work that, Black people need to do internally, just to undo a lot of the psychological damage and the programming that has been directed our way since we've been in this hemisphere. And just there's so much that we can do, and we need to do it.
We have to be about the work of healing, of restoration. Dr. Ron Walter said on my show shortly before he passed, he said, I asked him what was Dr. King's great gift. He said restoration. He said it without hesitation. He said, and that's your father's great gift too. I am somebody, keep hope alive, which is why, they marketed Barack Obama a particular way, because they know that when you break, the slaves are not born, they're made. And you don't make a slave, you break a slave in. But when you diminish me, you diminish yourself. My mother often says, Dwight, you cannot hurt me without hurting yourself. You can't help me without helping yourself. You can't help somebody else without helping somebody else.
But they're willing to do that. Is that it's not just us. It is white supremacy is alive and well, and it's fighting with all its power to stay in charge.
But power does protect itself, doesn't it?
Within that white supremacy, there's a disdain and a hatred for us that defies any logic. That is just very hard for us to get past. And so, I mean, when you factor in the variable, it is not just about us liberating us, fighting for our own self-liberation and our own self-definition. It is also fighting past their sense of superiority and their need to be in charge and to dominate all people that don't look like themselves.
All over the world, it's an issue, and it's an issue when we take that on and in ourselves. That sense of superiority, and it's a human problem. It's part of the human condition, and we have to heal it. We have to really face it in ourselves, in our society, and make things right. Well, I hope that you learned something today. I hope that you all got something out of this. I know it's a tough topic, but it's a topic that we have to tackle. Remember, these margins, Mark Fancher and Dwight McKee, these measures did not pass by overwhelming margins. No, they didn't. So this is still in us. This bug is still in the system, and we've got to work it out. I love you, everybody. Thank you, Jewel, for a great show. God bless you. God bless you. I'll see you on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson on Sunday. God bless you, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, Mark and Dwight and Robert. Robert, are you still there? I think Robert had to go, but it's all right, everybody. Great. I loved being with you today. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.